Hello, hello. Thank you for joining me today. We still have a little bit of time, like maybe 30 seconds. So I'm going to give people a chance to jump on. I know there were several people who mentioned to me and who registered who are not on yet. So I'm going to give those people a chance to jump on. I hope that you can hear me okay. If you cannot, please let me know so that I can adjust accordingly. And I will do that. All right. Well, it is 12 o'clock on the dot, and I like to be respectful of time. And so I am going to get started. My name is Andrea Rogers, and I am a board certified life coach. I specialize in working with women who have been betrayed in their marriages, but I also love working with people in any stage of life who feel like they see a destination or a goal or a place they want to go, and they're just not there, and there's a gap. And so, my heart is to help people get from here to there. That's kind of what I do, but I am also trained to work with trauma and people who have experienced trauma. And that was kind of the impetus for this webinar today. For the last 5 years or so, I have been going through a process of grief and healing and recovery. I was in an emotionally destructive marriage, a marriage where my ex husband was repeatedly unfaithful, and I didn't discover it until 14 years into the marriage. And we spent several years trying to recover that. Um, that was unsuccessful, and I filed for divorce in February of I'm sorry, in December of last year, and it was finally completed in August of this year. And so I have just been transitioning and going through changes from that. And so for the last 4 or 5 years, the thought of a new year always created a sense of trauma for me, because I was looking around and I was seeing people with all this new year, new you, and all this excitement and these things that setting goals and moving forward and running towards something. And I felt like I could barely get up off the sofa. And so that was kind of my heart in wanting to do this webinar today, because of my clients, people that I work with who I know are going through the same thing. I have friends who have just lost loved ones. If you're familiar with Dr. Tony Evans, you know his wife just passed away 2 years ago. And so around this time, it can be so exciting, and people have so much hope, but it can also be one of the most depressing times of year for people as we look around and see the world changing and growing. But I wanted to say to you, if you're here and you find yourself less than excited about the start of a new year. And this is going to sound very strange for me to say, but you're actually in a very good place. When we go through times of hardship or grief or disappointment or struggle, these are really crossroads in our life. They're calling cards, they're invitations for us to really dig deep and make some changes and make some decisions about what we want our life to look like and where we want to go from that point. And it's going to sound strange for me to say that, but I wanted to read you a Bible verse that kind of says the same thing. It's Ecclesiastes 7:2. And it says, "It is better to go to a house of mourning than to go to a house of feasting. For death is the destiny of everyone. The living should take this to heart." And basically, what it's saying is that the only thing that's certain in our lives is death. All of us are going to die at some point. And it is better to go to the house of mourning to learn how to navigate those tough situations, to learn how to wrestle with when things die in our life, because sometimes it's not a physical death. Sometimes it's the death of a marriage, like in my situation, or the death of a friendship, or the death of a job, or it could just be the death of a dream. And the more we learn how to navigate death and deal with death, the better we will be at having a full life. If we fear death and we run from death and we run from hard things, we run from mourning, we run from grief, we never learn the tools that we need to be healthy in this life. And if we know for sure that the only certain thing we're going to have is death, then we're in a great place when we find ourselves at an opportunity for death to be our teacher. So I hope that that makes sense to you and you're following what I'm saying. And I'm not saying that lightly as if it's a small thing. I've had so much death in the last 5 years, not just my marriage, but my sister died in the midst of all of this. My uncle died. I mean, it just, I could go on and on about the things that have changed and relationships that have died and dreams that have died. And these last 5 years have been such a powerful teacher to me. I hope that what I share with you today is a blessing to you, and it's something that you can take with you and carry with you as you start this new year. So, this is not going to be 3 easy steps to a better life. If that's why you're here, I'm sorry. I'm going to be very disappointing to you because I'm not offering you quick fixes or things that are suddenly going to make your situation better. What I'm going to offer to you, though, are things that can carry you through your whole life, no matter what situation you're in, no matter where you find yourself on the journey of life. These tools and tips that I'm going to offer are things that are really going to help you navigate the rest of your life. The name of my business is Fully Alive Coaching because I feel like a lot of us live our lives on half empty. We don't approach each day as if it could be our last, and we don't pour all of ourselves out and experience every moment and the joy that each day offers. And so, with this webinar, what I'm hoping is that it will be a turning point for you in your life. That the start of a new year is not about resolutions, which is great. I mean, as a coach, of course, I'm going to talk about goals and dreams and writing things down and visions and things like that, but those are not the things that are going to change your life. Those are not the things that are going to impact you the most. It's really going to be the decisions that you make in the day to day that are going to have the biggest impact on your life. And so, like I said, difficult times are really invitations or calling cards into a deeper kind of living. And it's hard to see that in the midst of pain, in the midst of grief. It's hard to see how can this lead me to a deeper kind of life. But when everything is destroyed, when everything is falling apart, you're really at a point of starting over. And the person that's in the driver's seat of your starting over is you. So you get to decide where you go from here, what kind of life you really want to live. Especially this is true for those of you who have um, end up divorced and you find yourself on the other side of a divorce. I've shared this before, but the word divorces has the same letters as the word discover. And I don't think this is true of just a marital divorce, but when you divorce yourself, it's kind of like death. When you go through a death process, it is a chance for something new to be reborn. And so I wanted to talk about grief first because life looks very different when you're grieving, when you're hurting, when you're going through something tough. You really have to put on a different set of glasses. And I wanted to show this. This is something I share with my clients or in my groups because it's a very powerful tool to have a visual. But this is a picture of what grief looks like. Most people think of grief as this, you've seen the 5 stages of grief and you've seen kind of the linear process, and it's not really linear. Grief looks like this. It's this tangled web and ball of emotions, and I'm going to hold it closer so you guys can see some of the words on there. But there's denial, dread, depression, anxiety, dismay, apathy, sorrow, pain, rage, rejection. I mean, if you have experienced grief, you know that this is true. These are all the things that you have to navigate when you're going through a grieving process. And it's not just this straight line, it's this ball that you have to untangle, and things are intermingled and touching, and you may be feeling all of those things all at the same time. So at this very moment, today, at the start of a new year, you get to decide. I want to say that over and over and over and over again. You get to decide what happens from this point. I'm going to share information. You get to decide whether you take it and apply it to your life. I'm going to give you some tools and some tips. You get to decide whether you explore them further, whether you read some of the books that I mentioned, whether you watch some of the webinars or listen to podcasts. You are in the driver's seat of your life. And that should be exciting to you because the only person that you have control over is you. So you are in the driver's seat and you get to decide what happens from here. So you get to decide, do you go off chasing and following paths that other people have gone on, or are you going to run after and pursue the path, the unique path that God has laid out for you? You get to decide whether you are going to run after your own destiny or whether you're going to try to copy and imitate and compare yourself to what someone else is doing. And what I hope is that at the end of this, you feel not only empowered, but that you actually feel excited about the idea of um, being in the driver's seat of your life. Okay, so let me get started on a couple of things that I want to talk about. And the first one being at the start of a new year, why do people set resolutions? Usually, they feel like they want to change something. We all know one of the biggest resolutions that people set is that they're going to lose weight. They feel like, they want to be healthier and they want to be better, and that's great. I'm again, as a coach, I'm all about health and wellness, but so many people focus on this external part that's dying. Again, I'm talking about death that's dying, it's wasting away, and they spend no time being intentional about what's going on in here or in here. And these two things, your brain and your heart, are the things that really navigate and control all of what goes on out here. So if you're dealing with anxiety and you're dealing with stress and you're depressed, But yet on the outside, you're like, I'm going to put this smiley face on and I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to look my best, but you're dying on the inside. Guess what's really going to happen? That outside's going to look great, but that inside's going to die. And we want to focus on being healthy from the inside out. So I did a little research and found out that about 45% of people set New Year's resolutions. They set these goals, they have these ideas of what they want to do, and then only about 8% actually achieve them. So you have 45% of people setting resolutions and 8% of people who actually achieve them. And so that goes back to my initial question of why do you want to set resolutions? Are you really um, trying to pursue a goal? Like I have a desire to write a book this year. And so I did put that on my list of my vision, but it's not because I'm chasing something that someone else suggested for me. um, 5 years ago, I was not in a position to put that on my list. And so you have to be realistic about where you are. If you're grieving, if you're experiencing trauma, if you're coming off major disappointment, maybe you did set resolutions for 2019 and nothing worked out the way that you hoped. That's a death. That's a death of a dream. And so if you're doing that, that's not the time for you to say, yes, I'm going to make all these major life changes. One of the things that happens when we're in trauma is our brain is flooded. And I'm not going to go into a lot of the neuroscience of that because there are people who can do that much better than I can. Excuse me, but let me just say that your brain gets flooded in trauma. And so you may have a hard time navigating some of the simplest, smallest decisions. And I'm going to give you two examples, real life examples that have just happened to me in the last month. I have a DVD player, and my DVD player remote stopped working a year ago, January. A year ago, my DVD remote stopped working. This is right at the time that I was moving. I was in the middle of switching attorneys to file for divorce a second time because my first attorney didn't do it. And I was like, oh man, my DVD remote is not working. So I haven't used my DVD player. I tried switching out the batteries. That didn't work. I was like, am I going to have to buy a new DVD player, even though this one I have is new, but my warranty was out? And so I have spent the last year without using my DVD player. And then suddenly the other day, I had a moment of clarity that perhaps I could go on Amazon and just order a new remote. Now, that sounds so simple, and it was so simple. The remote cost me $7. But in the middle of my trauma and trying to just navigate life and deal with day to day, I couldn't come up with a simple solution like go on Amazon and order a new remote. And the reason I'm sharing that is because imagine trying to make major life decisions. I can't think how to order a remote. Now, some decisions I had to make. I had to decide where I was going to live, had to decide what was going to happen with my kids. I had to decide how I was going to provide for myself financially and all these things. I mean, those were just things that had to happen. But I'm talking about in terms of like resolutions and trying to set goals for my life and figure out what these major dreams and visions that I have. That was not the time to try to do that when I couldn't even just make a simple decision like go on Amazon and order a remote. So when you're in this tough time of grief or trauma or disappointment, it's not the time for you to try to set big life goals and make these resolutions because basically you're setting yourself up for disappointment. So this webinar was called New Year So What? And it was kind of a play on words because the so what was like, so what, like as in, so what's next? But also a so what as in, who cares? Yes, the day flipped on the calendar, the year flipped on the calendar, but the only reason you know that is because you have a calendar in front of you. And that calendar really does not dictate how you live your life unless you let it. For people who are in a place to set resolutions, that is a great idea. For people who are not, it is a terrible idea. So the so what is like, who cares? Does that really matter for you? And what I'm going to spell out for you is the what. What does what mean in so what? And I already gave you the W, which was why. Why are you trying to set resolutions? Why does it matter? New year, new you is really the big thing. Do you really need a new you? Or are you in a place of just navigating and accepting and sitting with the you that exists today? Maybe you do need a new you. I don't know. But what I'm saying is that is today, right now, where you are, the time to decide that. And you have to look at where you are. All of us are on a different path, a different road, a different phase of our journey. And so, just like with seasons and seasons change, and in summer, I am not going to wear my wool coat and my turtleneck and my gloves because I'm going to burn up. Each of us is in different seasons in life. Now, in this world, we're all living, if you're in North America, you're in winter right now. We're in winter, but that doesn't mean that that's the season that it is for your life. For your life, you might be in summer. For your life, you might be in fall. For your life, you might be in spring. For people who are at this time where things are about to be birthed and to grow, that is New Year's is the perfect time to set resolutions. But if you're in a season of death and cold and hardness, that's not the time to go. Farmers do not plant seeds in winter. So, again, I'm not saying to you, don't set goals, don't have a vision, don't have a plan. What I'm saying to you is be realistic. Take an assessment with where you are and figure out what's going to work in your life. Don't make huge decisions about where you go next. So that's the W is why are you setting resolutions and what season are you in? Pay attention to the time in your life of where you are, and then you get to decide which season you're in and what are the best next steps for you. This H in what? WH, the H stands for health, but it's not health in the way that you think. I kind of gave you a clue at the beginning. I'm not talking about physical health, and that is important, but even more so is your emotional and your mental health. We take our cars to get checkups at least 2 or 3 times a year. We get our oil changed, we get our filters changed, we take our bodies to the doctor once a year and we get physical checkups. But most of us never take the time to do this mental and emotional assessment until we end up in positions like death and grief and hardship and trouble and trauma, which is why I said this could really be an invitation or a calling card for you to step into a deeper life. And so the health I want to talk about is your emotional and your mental well-being and making sure that you are taking care of those. These hard times provide an opportunity for you to get real with yourself, for you to step back and take an assessment and see, what are my thoughts? What's going on in my mind? Am I even mourning or grieving in a way that's healthy? And most of us don't know because in our society, we don't spend a lot of time talking about what healthy grief looks like. And one of the words that I use when I'm talking about grief and disappointment is hug. And you give yourself a lot of hugs. And it's really practicing. If you know who Kristen Neff is, she talks a lot about self-compassion. That's her specialty. But giving yourself hugs is an act of practicing self-compassion. And a hug stands for, the H is for honoring, and that's really honoring yourself and honoring whatever emotions you're experiencing in the moment, not judging them, not ignoring them, not trying to um, positive, or as Brene Brown says, silver line them, but really honoring them and saying, okay, what am I feeling in this moment? If you remember this ball, it's looking at this ball and saying, what's going on in me? What am I having in here? Or if you have a feeling wheel, pulling up a feeling wheel, you can just Google it, feeling wheel, and it'll give you all these different emotions and things that you may be experiencing that you're not even aware of. So it's honoring that. That's the H in a hug. The U is unpacking it. And you may have to do that with a therapist, with a coach, with a psychiatrist. Sometimes that means taking medication, and that is okay. That's a part of being healthy, is really just as if your blood pressure was high, or um, if you had a sinus infection, you would take medication for that. And so when you've got something going on here mentally, it may mean taking medication, and that's okay. And then the G in the hug is one, grieving it, whatever it is you're feeling, and then giving it to God. Because ultimately, while you are in control of yourself, you are not in control of all the people around you. You are not control of events and things that go on in the world. You're not in control of what happens outside of your home and even in your home. If you have kids, you're not in control of them. We like to think that we are, but we're not. And so giving it to God, because he is the one that is ultimately in control of everything. And so part of being healthy is giving yourself lots of hugs, honoring your emotions, unpacking them, grieving the things that you need to grieve, and giving it to God. But the other part of your health that I really want to focus on, this H in the what, is humor. When you are sad, when you are depressed, when you have been through trauma, the last thing you want to do is laugh. It can actually feel pretty painful. I remember a time where it was like, please don't come in here trying to make me laugh, because it felt disrespectful. It felt like my feelings and my thoughts were being disregarded. But part of healthiness is learning to laugh. And you get to decide what you laugh at. It could be laughing at yourself. Maybe you take pictures of yourself with funny filters on your phone. And I know that sounds silly, but these are some of the proven ways that you can generate some laughter in your own life, because again, you are the one that's in control. And learning how to laugh is not just good when you're in hard times. Laughter, you've heard it said, laughter is the best medicine. Laughter is good for the soul. I'm actually going to tell you about a doctor who did an experiment where he laughed, and what his results were. And so it's so important for you. If I could give you something to put on your list, is to learn to laugh more. It said children laugh like 100 times a day. I have 4 kids, and I can tell you that's probably pretty accurate. My kids laugh all the time at anything. They can find humor in the smallest things. And that has been one of the things that has been so therapeutic for me, is learning how to laugh with them, learning how to laugh at myself, and even finding humor in the traumatic situation that I've been going through. And so, let me tell you some of the benefits of humor that you may not know. Humor boosts your immune system. It triggers the release of endorphins, which are the good hormones that you want, especially if you're depressed or you're struggling or you're having a hard time. It protects the heart. Humor, laughter actually burns calories. So we're not talking about physical health, but it does benefit your physical health to learn to laugh. You've heard people say, I had a good belly laugh. Well, a laugh that comes from your belly is it's good for you. You're building core muscles. If you've ever had a good laugh and been sore in your stomach afterwards, you know that laughter is a workout. It also lightens your load and relieves a lot of pain. And so, as silly as it sounds, this is one of the benefits of the internet right now is you can go on and watch funny kid videos. You can go on and watch babies laughing. One of the things that I had to do right after I filed for divorce because the mood was so heavy in my home with my kids, and even for me, just getting up facing the day to day was I called it funny time. So every night before we went to bed, I would pull up something funny. And it was just videos that I found on the internet, America's Funniest Home Videos. Tony Baker is one of my favorite comedians. He's fairly clean and he just does animal voiceovers, so my kids love those. Maybe it's for you watching some of your favorite movies. And I know sometimes those can be triggers, so be careful with that. But just whatever is going to work for you, you get to decide what you want to look at or what's going to work, and just something to bring a little bit of humor, a little bit of light, a little bit of laughter into your everyday. And again, this is not just true when you're going through a hard time. This is true all the time. We all need to laugh. Um, Laughter relaxes your whole body. We carry stress, we carry emotions, we carry pain in our body. There's a great book called The Body Keeps the Score. So if you like to read books and we're talking about emotional and mental well-being, I highly recommend that book because it helps you understand how your body stores up trauma and painful experiences, but laughter helps to release them. And so find a way to infuse or inject a little bit of laughter into your life. If you have a friend that is funny, I have several funny friends and we just text back and forth. You can find memes, you can find gifts. Like I said, this is the gift that the internet provides for us. Yes, there are bad things out there, but there are also great things, and with the internet, we don't have to wait for a comedy special or show. We can go out and find our own humor. So I encourage you highly to do that. But I wanted to tell you about Norman Cousins because I mentioned this. He was a researcher. I can't remember, he had a PhD. I can't remember what it was in, but it basically, he got diagnosed with a degenerative disease and the prognosis wasn't good for him. He was in constant pain all the time, and ironically, he already studied human emotions and how those things impact the physiology of the body. So this was already his field of research, but he asked his doctors to let him do an experiment where they gave him high doses of vitamin C, but he also wanted to see how humor would impact his health. So this was part of his treatment plan. And what he did was he watched humorous movies and TV shows and made sure that he got laughter infused into his day, which is what I'm suggesting for you. And basically, what he said was 10 minutes of laughter, 10 minutes, just 10 minutes of laughter gave him 2 hours of pain free sleep. 10 minutes of laughter gave him 2 hours of pain free sleep. So, this helps you to know how important it is for you to make sure that you are bringing humor into your life, into your situation. And again, not just today, but every day. Make sure that at some point you find things to laugh at or smile or chuckle, even if it's by yourself or within yourself or you're laughing at yourself. The A in the what, so what. So we've got the W of why are you setting resolutions, what are you focusing on. The H was your health, and again talking about mental and emotional health and making sure that you are infusing and injecting humor into your life. The A stands for a couple of things. The A stands for acceptance. And this is one of the hardest places for us to land. It's actually the last stage in the grief cycle, is coming to this place of acceptance. But we never reach a point of true healing. We never reach a point of um, wellness unless we learn to accept things the way that they are. Our culture is so much, that's where the new year, new you is like, come on, change it, make it different, do something else. And there are some things that you can't change. You can't change. You can't change another person's mind. You can't change if your mom died. You can't bring her back. You can't change that. You have to learn how to accept that and learn how to live with that and learn how to navigate that. And so learning to live from a place of acceptance. And this is not a place of, oh, I'm just going to sit back and let things happen to me and do nothing about it. No, acceptance is, I look at my life and I accept the things, as part of the serenity prayer, is I accept the things that I cannot change. And so learning to do that without bitterness, without resentment, without denial or anger is really one of the hardest things that we can learn to do. And I wanted to read this. If you know who Dr. Carolyn Leaf is, she's a neuroscientist and she focuses a lot on the brain. So if you want somebody to follow on Facebook or Instagram, or you want to read some of her books, she is a great resource to have in your pocket and talking about health, emotional, and mental health. But one of the things she said is that not all growth is about change. And I'm reading this quote straight from her. Sometimes it's about giving yourself permission to be where you are now. Sometimes it's less about changing yourself into someone new and more about embracing the parts of you that are human and vulnerable. And again, I'm going back to what I said at the beginning, that being in this place of uncertainty or grief or hardship is really an invitation for you to go deeper. Most of us do not like the vulnerable parts of ourselves. We don't like the parts of ourselves that feel weak. But when you really learn to embrace and accept those things, Brene Brown, another great resource to look at and follow, she talks a lot about the power of vulnerability. And that is really how we connect with one another, is by being vulnerable. None of us bonds and becomes truly intimate with these perfect images of ourselves that we like to portray. None of us, as much as we think we do, none of us forms true intimacy through Facebook, through social media, through the highlight reel of our lives. The most rich relationships that we have, the deepest connections that we have, come with people that we can be truly vulnerable with, the people that we can be naked and unashamed with. And so coming to this place of acceptance that I can't change that I am hurting. I can't change that this thing happened to me, but I can learn to accept it. I can learn to make peace with it. I can learn to live with it. I can learn to grow from it. But all of that starts with a place of acceptance and accepting that you're not where someone else is. Your best friend may be setting big goals for 2020. I've got clear vision for 2020. That's the thing with the 2020 vision. And it works. It's great if that's where you are. But if it's not where you are, it doesn't work. And so learning to accept where you are, to accept what's going on with you is really what's important. And so I want to encourage you to learn to live in the moment, Again, going back to Kristen Neff and practicing self compassion, she talks a lot about mindfulness. And part of acceptance is staying in the moment, not going too far off in the future or not getting stuck in the past, but learning to accept right where you are today. So, what did you wake up with on your mind this morning? What do you have to do today? What's going on around you right now? You can't go into tomorrow or the next day or the next day or a year from now, and you can't go back to yesterday. Today is all you have. It's the gift. You've heard it said that's why it's called a present, the present, because it's the only place that you can be. So don't a lot of people are physically in today, but they're mentally somewhere else. So, learning to accept where you are, learning to practice mindfulness, that's the A in the what? Accepting, acknowledging, affirming. I cannot tell you the power of speaking lovingly to yourself and being kind to yourself. We are so hard on ourselves when we're struggling mentally and emotionally. If you had just had open heart surgery, you would never expect yourself to be up setting new goals and running around and chasing things. Your focus would be I'm going to lay here, take the pain meds that the doctor has given me, and focus on my healing. And for many of us, that's where we need to be today, is focused on our healing. And again, I'm not talking about a physical healing, I'm talking about a mental and emotional healing, learning how to be well. If you want another great book to read, it is Emotionally Healthy Spirituality. That popped up on my memories this year. It was a book that I read in 2017 that was so helpful for me, especially if you are a believer, you struggle with how do I have faith, but I'm battling all of these emotions. And he just gives some real life, practical um, ideas and insights into what it looks like to truly be an emotionally healthy believer. The last thing I'm going to talk about is the T and the what. So the W was, why are you setting resolutions? What are you trying to achieve? Do you know where you are in your life? Like, is this even the season for you to be setting resolutions? The H was about health, and again, that was emotional health and mental health, and really focusing on humor and making sure that you um, inject humor into your life. The A is about acceptance, accepting, acknowledging, and affirming. The T is about time. And I kind of alluded to this with the seasons. Time is so important, knowing what time it is. I'm going to read a verse that you're probably very familiar with in Ecclesiastes, but most of us think that because the calendar flipped, that now is the time for us to set these resolutions and set these big goals. And if you've paid attention to what I've shared for the first three letters, if you are in a time of healing and you are in a time of grief and trauma, it is not the time, it's not the season for you to go out and try to make these big, huge life changes. It really is about acceptance. It really is about healing. It really is about self compassion and being kind to yourself, because the reason this is so important is because the next person that's coming behind you, the way you handle your grief or your hard time or your trouble is the same way that you're going to handle the next person. And without even trying, suddenly we become unsafe. If we are unsafe to ourselves, we will be unsafe to others. So, to the next person that's grieving, you will be less than compassionate. You will try to give them a pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and there's a reason for everything kind of talk. And if you've ever been hurting, you know that those are not helpful in the moment. There is a time for those again when the person is ready to hear it, but we have to know that. We have to be able to assess that. And if we can't do that for ourselves, if we can't acknowledge the right time for ourselves, we certainly won't be able to do that for other people. So the T stands for time, knowing what time it is, and living in truth. When we're in pain, denial seems like such a safe place. And for a moment, it is. When things are overwhelming, when someone has just died, we've just experienced a trauma, we've gotten a major health diagnosis, you've lost a job, our bodies, our brains go into a sense of denial. That is okay for a time, but then there comes a time where we have to go back to acceptance of the truth. So if I get fired from my job, I cannot pretend that I did not and still show up to work every day. They would think I was certifiably insane and probably call security on me. And so part of living in the truth is being honest with yourself first. So that means giving space to those hard thoughts and emotions that you want so much to run from. It means um, sitting with the grief and not trying to rush yourself from it. I have often said that grief is like a weight that we put on our back. And until we do the hug thing, we honor and unpack and we grieve it and we give it to God, the weight doesn't get lighter. And if life is like a treadmill, which I think it is for most people, if life is like a treadmill and you're running on this treadmill with this 50 or 100-pound weight on your back, you're not going to get very far. So the first thing you have to do is step off the treadmill and be okay with that. And it really is okay to step off, to assess what's going on with you, where you are, what you're feeling. Give yourself lots of hugs, honoring, unpacking, grieving, giving it to God. Give yourself lots of hugs and then decide, are you ready to, is the backpack empty? Have you processed everything in there? Are you ready to leave it behind? And are you ready to get back on the treadmill? It never stops moving, but you get to decide the pace at which you go. Do you crawl on the side first? Do you just walk in place? Do you slowly step on and do a slow walk? Or are you ready to run? And most of us, when we are fresh out of hardship, are not ready to get on and run. It really is a time of taking it slow. So, this is a way about paying attention to the time, not being dictated by what's going on with someone else or what's going on with the calendar, but really just where are you in your life? What season are you in? I say that the quickest path to disappointment, to discontentment, and to disillusionment is the path that you're trying to follow someone else on. You've heard people say comparison is the thief of joy. That's basically saying the same thing. The biggest way for you to be disillusioned, disappointment, and discontent is trying to be someone else. God made us each unique. He gave us each unique circumstances. We're each walking different paths. And so you cannot try to run someone else's race. We each have a race to run. And you're not in competition with anyone. Your day-to-day duty, your day-to-day assignment is to live your life fully, completely, abundantly, uniquely, as your own person. So remember what I said. You're the one driving the car. No one else can drive the car of your life for you. There's a path that God has laid out for you. So the only way to be your best self is to be your own self. The only way to be your best self is to be your own self. You cannot copy someone else. You cannot imitate what someone else is doing. Discover, seek, um, be passionate about who God has created you to be, what God has called you to do. And that is the way that you come fully into your true self, your best self, your most authentic self, and that you learn to live your true and your best and your most authentic life. I wanted to read Ecclesiastes as I close out, and it's in the Message Bible. It's titled, "There's a right time for everything." There's an opportune time to do things, a right time for everything on the earth, a right time for birth and another for death, a right time to plant and another to reap, a right time to kill and another to heal, a right time to destroy and another to construct, a right time to cry and another to laugh, a right time to lament and another to cheer, a right time to make love and another to abstain, a right time to embrace and another to part, a right time to search and another to count your losses, a right time to hold on and another to let go, a right time to rip out and another to mend, a right time to shut up and another to speak up, a right time to love and another to hate, and a right time to wage war and another to make peace. So, my final question to you, and I kind of started with this question, is what time is it for you? I can't tell you what time it is for you. The calendar can't tell you what time it is for you. Your friend can't tell you what time it is for you. You discover what time it is for you. Where does God have you right now? Is it a time to reap or is it a time to sow? Is it a time to speak up or a time to be quiet? Is it a time to move on or a time to heal? You are the one who gets to make that choice. And you can't decide what time it is if you're not living in truth. So that is all that I had for you today. If you have questions, you can type them in the chat box that you should see there available to you. I would love to hear your thoughts or ideas. I don't have anyone's picture up because this is also going live on Facebook and I wanted to respect people's privacy. But I did want to give you a chance to ask questions or to share your thoughts. Or if you're really struggling and you're like, yeah, Andrea, that all sounds good, but tell me what that looks like practically every day in my real life. I would love to be able to take these last few minutes to answer your questions or hear your thoughts. So just take a few minutes if you have questions or ideas. And while you're doing that, I will tell you a little bit more about me and where I'm headed to the new year. I'm really looking forward to doing more of these webinars. I'm getting my YouTube channel set up so that I can post these on there. But I really see every day the number of people who are walking through this life wounded. They're walking through life hurting. And what they need to hear more than anything is Me Too. We had the Me Too movement when it came to um, sexual harassment or sexual crimes, and we saw a lot of that. But where is the Me Too movement for the people who are hurting, who need help, who are struggling? And that's going to be my goal in 2020 is to provide more avenues and resources for people who want them. And so you can look for that more. My Facebook page is Fully Alive Coaching. That is the name of my business, and also the way you can find out if you want to contact me or send me a private message. Thank you so much for your feedback. I appreciate. Glad that you found it helpful, and thank you for letting me know. Sometimes when you do these webinars and you can't see people and engage with them, it feels like you're talking to yourself. So thank you for those of you who are sending me feedback saying thank you and that you found it helpful. I am glad to do it. I hope that as you step into this new year, that you really take the things that I shared to heart, that you're really kind to yourself. I can't stress enough if you look up Kristen Neff and look up self compassion. I think that that is one of the most important things that you can um, learn to do for yourself is self-compassion, and also just practicing some of the things that I mentioned, which is honoring yourself, loving yourself. I don't see any more questions coming in or comments, and so I am going to sign off. Thank you again for spending your new year with me. I pray that this year you really learn to discover one, that you are loved, that you are enough, that God has a good plan for your life, and that He will take everything that has happened to you and work it together in a way that His good plan for your life comes to pass. Have a great day and a great new year, and I hope to see you soon.